left to die. The taking Anna was driving to her boyfriend when the two men kidnapped her at gunpoint. They pretended a gang of unknown men had attacked them on the side of Road 50 near Sacramento. She stopped to help them. This was when one of them covered her mouth with his hand, shoved a pistol between her ribs, and ordered her to move. He was bulky, had a short but thick black beard. His body reeked of hard physical labor and a dislike of soap and water. The hand covering Anna's mouth smelled of motor oil. Blood drained from her veins as they began walking toward the wooded area near the road. The other man kept looking at her body, measuring her up. He was lanky and wore a handlebar mustache. Even though she did not want to realize it, Anna knew what this kidnapping was about. The thin man quickly gagged her with a dirty cloth, which also smelled and tasted of oil. His moves were proficient. It was clear to Anna that this was not their first time. Breathing was difficult, and her eyes kept darting around, trying to find a way out. But she saw none. "Move," ordered the bearded man, then shoved Anna forward. She stumbled, but then regained her balance. The big man held her in a firm grip. Anna whimpered loudly, but her captor grabbed her by the throat and turned to her. "If you don't shut up, I will kill you." His voice was eerily calm but stern. "After all, it doesn't really matter if you're dead or alive. If you want to live a bit more, honey, you shut your mouth. Understood?" The smell of tobacco and advanced tooth decay emanated from the man's mouth as he spoke. He smiled, and Anna nodded. Her face and eyes radiated desperation, and she felt her whole body trembling. Tears flooded her cheeks. "How far is the abandoned factory?" asked the lanky man. "Not far, don't worry. We'll be there in no time." "Are you sure there's nobody there?" the thin man insisted. "Last time I checked, nobody was there," the bearded man replied, but he already had a labored breathing. His heart and lungs had a hard time keeping up with the pace. They had to hurry, so the men pressed on. The sun was already setting, and a thick shadow was spreading over the forested area. They picked up the pace even more. Anna was struggling to keep up, so the big man kept nudging her onward. Soon, the imposing contour of a ruined old factory appeared through the foliage. The area was littered with garbage, and the air smelled accordingly. A rusted chain-link fence surrounded the factory grounds. The fence, too, was only a remnant. It was full of holes, and in several areas, it had fallen to the weedy ground. "Here we are," said the bearded man. "Hallelujah, brother," said his partner. "Can't wait to get a piece of that ass." "Keep quiet." They dragged Anna through the rasped fence, then headed toward a gaping hole in one of the factory's walls. The building appeared to be at least 60, or maybe 70, years old. "What kind of factory was this?" asked the thin man, forgetting for a moment about their plans with the woman. "Not sure. Some meat processing factory, I think. But I don't remember. It fits the purpose. We can also dump the body here. Good luck finding her." He uttered a slight laugh, and Anna cried out in horror, forgetting all the big man's warnings. "Don't worry, honey, it will be fun," said the lanky man, then uttered an evil, mocking laugh. Going through the hole, and into the factory, was easy. They had to step up about 2 feet onto the large concrete floor. The roof had lots of holes, the walls too. Many of the red bricks making up the walls had either been stolen, or they were laying in the thick vegetation all around the building. The factory floor was even more garbage-ridden. Everything of value had been stolen a long time ago. It was a large open space filled with rubble and the remnants of heavy machinery. The men took Anna to the far end of the open space, then went through an opening which used to be a large industrial door. It was leading to a smaller area with a walk-in freezer, which had a rusty door. "All right, party time," the thin man shouted, and began unbuckling his belt. "Keep quiet, you idiot. Don't screw this up." All right. I'm sorry." He raised his hands in a placating manner, but he already fixated his eyes on the girl, whose eyes were wide open, looking around in terror. The bearded man continued, "We've gotten away with all the others. Please, don't screw it up." "Okay, I won't. Let's do this." Just as the men wanted to proceed, a dull metallic sound interrupted them. It came from the freezer door. "What the hell?" asked both men at the same time. Anna tried to scream, but the ollie cloth muffled it. "Shut up," ordered the big man, and put his hand to her mouth, and held her tight. Another hang came, this one louder. It startled both men, and gave Anna the priceless hope that maybe somebody is there who could help her. The abductors just stared at each other and the door back and forth. The hang came again. "Somebody is inside," said the bearded man. "What are we going to do?" asked his partner. "I don't know, but if anybody is messing with us, I'm gonna kill them." He readied his pistol, which he had put safely behind his belt. "Bang one more time, and I swear to God." The bang came despite the big man's threats. He signaled his partner to open the freezer door. In the meantime, he pointed his weapon at the door. Anna watched everything with a racing heart. The thin man just stared at the door, then at his partner. "Come on, open the goddamn door." "All right, I'll do it." He moved to the door with hesitating steps. The big man waited while holding Anna in an iron grip with his other hand. Age-old grime covered the door's latch, but the man grabbed it, nevertheless. He looked back at his partner in crime, who nodded. The handle creaked, then the man pushed open the door. It was not an easy feat. The hinges were tired. Darkness lay before them as the door opened. A musty smell of death, ammonia, and iron hit their noses, and the figure of a man stood in the doorway. All three of them gasped when they saw him. He looked dead for a long time, but he stood there, staring at them. Anna tried to scream, but the cloth did not let her. The men just stared at the thing in the doorway and began backing away. The figure shuffled one of his feet and uttered a low growl. Most of his clothing had rotted away, his skin was also partially fallen off. His flesh was already dark with rot. His eyes somehow survived, even though they had gone almost completely white. A long blackened tongue snaked out from his lipless mouth, as if tasting the air all around. "What the hell is that?" the thin man asked while backing away. "Some more." His partner didn't reply. The pistol was visibly shaking in his hand. His stare was locked onto the monstrous figure. When the dead man shuffled again towards them, he pulled the trigger. The gunshots were deafening in the small space. Given the close range, they hit their target. The figure got riddled with bullets. It staggered back into the darkness, then a thud sounded as it fell onto the floor. The bearded man pushed Anna toward the freezer door, and with a forceful move, he shoved her in. He pulled the trigger again, but there were no more bullets. "Shit. Let's close the door," he shouted to his partner, and they both grabbed the heavy door and pulled. Anna uttered a muffled scream and tried to run back before the men closed the door. But the door closed with a bang, and Anna got enveloped in almost complete darkness. In death's embrace, the men tried to lock the door again, but the latch just would not budge. After a few hasty attempts, they fled. Anna ran to the door, banged on it, tried to pull it, kicked it, but to no avail. Then she realized that the dirty cloth was still around her face and mouth, so she reached behind and tried to undo the crude knot one of her captors had made. Her fingers were trembling so badly that Anna needed at least a minute to get rid of the gag. She took a desperate breath, but only foul air entered her lungs. Anna tried the door several more times, but there was nothing she could do to open it. It proved too heavy for her. The darkness and the foul odors were too oppressive. She had to get out. Also, the fact that there was a corpse in there with her, which was inexplicably alive a few minutes ago, made the situation exponentially more grave. Anna stopped and listened. Her muscles were already hurting from the strain, and the lack of oxygen took its toll on her lungs. She tried to look all around, but there was no other light source besides the thin crack under the freezer door. Then something moved. She uttered a startled scream, then covered her mouth with her hand. Anna's heart pounded like a hammer. Staying silent proved to be a genuine struggle. Then again, a brief, soggy shuffle came from somewhere in the darkness inside. Adrenaline flooded her again, giving her the energy to fight or flee. Anna didn't want to fight that hideous, decomposed body. Neither could she escape it if it came back to life again. "There's no way out," she thought. "This is where I'll die." Then the shuffling began again, but this time it was not only for a moment. A groan sounded from the endless darkness. She knew what it meant. The woman was looking around frantically, but saw nothing. Where to run? What to do? Is this the end? The shuffling resumed. She stood with her back to the door, then moved along the wall to the side. Maybe the growling corpse will not hear her, and she'll buy some time to figure out an escape plan. Or maybe she will stumble on something, which she can use as a weapon. But her feet felt only useless garbage. A growl came again, and she frowned. It sounded frustrated. She did not understand how a dead man can be frustrated, but there she was. She heard the soggy steps approach, and the reek of death came closer. Anna backed away some more along the wall, but she had to be careful. The steps came closer, and they also picked up speed. Anna panicked. Her adrenaline spiked through the roof, and she felt her spine and back of the neck tickle. She raised her hands in front of her to defend herself against whatever was coming, but it was useless. Cold dead hands grabbed her, and the rotten fumes of the monster hit her in the face. She screamed and tried to fight off the walking corpse, but it was strong. It grabbed her throat, and she felt cold fluid ooze from its hand as it squeezed. The dead man forced Anna to the ground. No matter how much did she scream, the dead man was unrelenting. Then she noticed its eyes. They became burning red, as if something had awakened inside of the pestilent, decaying body. It opened its mouth wide, and Anna screamed again until her lungs and throat ached. Bones crunched and tendons ripped as something was trying to make its way out of the dead man's mouth. Anna saw several wiggling things emerge. They were like tentacles or appendages. In a last desperate attempt, she tried to free herself from the iron grip, but she had no chance. The tentacles engulfed her face, cutting off her air. A pungent smell of death, sulfur, and blood choked her, then something slimy forced its way into her throat. It triggered a powerful vomiting reflex, but it did not matter. The slimy thing forced its way inside the woman, burning her throat. She gasped for air after the tentacles released her face, then kept coughing and grabbing at her throat. The dead man fell to the ground and remained motionless, while Anna tried to make herself throw up. She was feeling something move inside her, then the pain started. It was a powerful stinging and burning tearing at the inside of her stomach. Then she felt dizzy and powerless. Soon, she fell too on the freezer's floor. Her body lay motionless, but her mind did not. As the foreign entity was churning inside her, vivid and horrible visions plagued Anna. She saw things which couldn't have existed even in the weirdest horror story or most terrible nightmare. Anna saw terrors from another world, a world far away, ruled by dark gods and sinister creatures. The authorities were alerted soon after the shots had been fired. Several people had heard them, so the police soon rushed to the scene. They found the collapsed woman and the carcass, which were in a state of advanced decomposition. The woman was not dead. Her pulse was faint, but she was definitely still alive. Paramedics could stabilize her on the scene before trying to transport her to one of the hospitals in the city. They loaded her into an ambulance, which sped towards Sacramento with sirens blaring. 2 paramedics were with Anna in the back of the ambulance. They immediately noticed her strange condition. Blackish-red fluid on her face, and around her mouth, a pale face, and veins, which were darker than usual. Their color stood out against the whiteness of Anna's skin. Her eyes were moving around like she was in REM sleep. Sometimes, short bursts of muscle spasms came upon her, which the paramedics found highly unusual. Her heart began to beat increasingly faster, then she woke up for a few seconds. She tried to speak. "It's in me." "Please calm down, ma'am," said one paramedic, a young woman. "We'll take care of you." "No. It's in me. Something's inside me. The dead man." Then she lost consciousness again. The paramedic she was talking to looked at her colleague, who was a man several years her senior. "She's delirious." "Don't worry," he said calmly. "You'll see plenty of cases like this." "You're telling me this is normal?" "Not all of it, no. But the hallucinations, and the senseless talking. Yes. They will know after running the tests. Until then, let's just keep her alive." "Something's not right here," said the woman paramedic with furrowed brows. "Nothing's all right, that's why we're not out of a job yet," the man laughed. He had been on the job for a long time. Nothing seemed to faze him. She might be in shock, or she might have consumed something not so legal. She's stable, and that's the most important. Our job is to bring her to the ER alive. Then the guys there will take care of her. The ambulance arrived at the hospital. They rushed Anna to the emergency room, where they began drawing blood samples and performing the usual investigations. Alarms were raised when one nurse tried to draw blood from Anna. It was thick. She could barely draw a few drops. Anna's complexion became paler than ever, even though her skin possessed the usual sunburned tan of the California beat before the incident. She tried again to draw some more, but the blood just would not flow. What came out during the second attempt was of a dark red color. The nurse signaled to the doctor that something strange was happening. Even though Anna's blood was thick and dark, her eyes were moving rapidly under the lids, and also her heart was beating, albeit faintly. The doctor took his stethoscope and listened to Anna's heartbeat. It was there, but he heard something else as well. Weird noises came from the woman's chest, and as the doctor moved the chest piece around Anna's torso, he kept hearing them. He then looked at the woman's face and saw her eyes. They were wide open, but he noticed a slight widening of the irises. He placed the stethoscope on the table beside him, then jumped when Anna's body began convulsing violently. She was thrashing around like a large fish on a hook. The staff rushed to hold her down, but it was hard to hold her down. "Give her 10 milligrams of midazolam," the doctor shouted. The nurse, who tried to draw Anna's blood, rushed to the medicine cabinet to get the sedative. In the meantime, the others were struggling to keep Anna pinned to the bed. A foul-smelling foam came out of her mouth, which made people recoil. Some of her veins burst, leaving dark patches on her skin. Blood burst from her ears, nose, and eyes. What the hell is happening? Several people asked this question almost at the same time. Hospital staff kept looking at the doctor, who seemed just as clueless as everybody else. In a last moment of semi-consciousness, Anna spoke. Tortured words came out of her throat, searing even more the already terrified staff. "Kill me," came the pleading voice, but the guttural gurgling of blood in her throat soon choked it. After a few more convulsions, she died. The nurse who had prepared the sedative had no chance of administering it. She just stared at the contorted, bloody, pale corpse on the hospital bed. "What now, doctor?" "I don't know," he replied, then wiped the sweat from his face and forehead. It was not common for the doctor to say that he didn't know. The other members of the staff knew, however, that this case was way out of the ordinary. "Maybe," the doctor began, "maybe somebody poisoned her. To me, it looks like poisoning. We'll know more after the autopsy and the toxicology report." "I've never seen anything like this," said a nurse. "Me neither," the doctor replied. "Should we take her to the morgue?" "Yes, of course. Please." Before taking in another patient, the doctor felt the need to sit. He stared aimlessly in front of himself for a few good minutes. Rise from the darkness. A hospital worker took Anna's body to the morgue, which already had several bodies in it. Darkness was already upon the city, and unbeknownst to the staff, upon the hospital too. It was a different kind of darkness, though, a darkness from a different world. Whatever happened in the night, nobody knew for sure. Some facts were certain, though. Anna's body disappeared from the morgue. Also, hospital staff found a janitor and a security guard dead in the most horrible ways. The janitor, who was performing his duties near the morgue entrance, in the basement, had been found with his head ripped off, and his body had been mangled. Large chunks of flesh were also missing from his arms and legs. It looked like something had tried to eat him. Witnesses described the scene as a bloodbath. The security guard had been killed in the hospital's backyard when making his nightly rounds. His death had been quicker, with only a few slashes to the throat, chest, and face. His body, too, was lying in a pool of blood, shocking those who had stumbled upon it. Several patients had reported strange noises coming from the basement area. Also, some patients reported that a strange shadowy figure was roaming the corridors on the first floor. They also mentioned a foul odor coming from the figure, and also faint growling. Those who had seen the strange figure reported the instant feeling of dread, as if something extremely dangerous was nearby. Investigators found the morgue stretcher, on which lay Anna's body, turned on its side on the floor. Pools of clogged blood and other bodily fluids were laying all around the stretcher. Also bloody hand and footprints. They found no sign of anybody else at the scene. The events baffled investigators and the hospital officials. They placed the hospital under a quarantine, and a manhunt was initiated. The assumption was that Anna somehow survived, and she was not actually poisoned, but some kind of illness afflicted her, possibly a never-before-seen strain of rabies. When the investigators got access to the security footage, they found out that whatever caused the night's events, it had been more than just rabies. All the relevant security camera footage was dark. Lights were switched off in the morgue, only a little light came in from outside through the narrow windows. Also, in the corridors, the lights were dimmed in the patient areas, or where they were not considered necessary. Nevertheless, investigators were able to gather important, but also extremely strange, information from the tapes. About an hour after the hospital worker took Anna's body to the morgue, the body began convulsing again. The footage showed her sit up on the stretcher after a short while. When she tried to get down, the stretcher tumbled on its side, and she fell on the floor. There she vomited, then proceeded crawling through it without issue. Her gait was like that of a drunk person. She was shuffling around with difficulty. But then she stopped. She probably heard the janitor in the corridor outside, who was mopping up the floor. The footage from the corridor showed the man working with headphones in his ears. He couldn't have heard Anna falling with the stretcher or opening the morgue door. When she recognized that there was somebody nearby, she was no longer stumbling around. She headed straight for the janitor and tore him to pieces. Then proceeded to cat from the body. Investigators agreed that this footage was one of, or maybe the most brutal, they have ever seen. Other cameras showed Anna walking the dim corridors of the first floor, looking for something. Her gait was more deliberate now, no more shuffling. She was like a predator in reconnaissance. When she found the hack door, she bolted out. The unfortunate security guard happened to be in the way. She finished him with a few quick moves. He had no chance at all. Anna jumped the hospital fence with feline agility, then disappeared into the darkness. His colleague had found the security guard shortly after the incident, when the other guard noticed that he had not come back from his round. Also, he had not answered his calls. They found the slaughtered janitor only later. The slaughtered two men were sitting in front of the television the same night as Anna escaped from the hospital. The breaking news just came on, so they were watching with great interest. It was the middle of the night, but several things were not letting them sleep. The house they were staying in was located on the city's outskirts. "Hey, Billy. Look at this. Can you believe it?" asked the bigger of the two. "I dunno, man. We sure screwed up big time. You think she's coming for us?" The man's voice was shaking. His eyes were open wide, his pupils dilated, even though no light was on, only the television. "Hell knows, but better be ready. Should we use some more of this?" asked Billy while dangling a small plastic bag with white powder in it. No, we've used enough. We just need enough to be sharp and not fall asleep. We don't know what's coming. Maybe that bitch is gonna come back for us, or maybe the pigs. Whatever comes, we have to be prepared. All right, Chuck. I'm with ye, Billy replied, and stared at the TV with empty eyes. But how could this happen? All the others, it went so smooth with them. Not even one body. You can't always win, Billy. Chuck drew his pistol and checked the magazine. It was full of bullets. What was that in the freezer? Billy asked. He had asked this question for at least 10 times since the incident, but kept repeating it mechanically. A very sick man, I told you that. Now, pull yourself together. No, it wasn't, and you know it. This is some real fucked up shit. Maybe this is the way God will punish us for what we had done. Come on. A few hours ago, you were drooling over that girl, and now you're talking about God. Billy gasped when the power went out. Chuck just uttered a curse and readied his pistol. Here we go, he said, then stood up. Billy took out his pistol, too. It was trembling in his hands. Chuck went to the window, drew the curtain aside, and tried to peek outside. Nothing moved. Darkness was all around the house. The moon was hiding behind a thick cloud cover, so the yard was pitch black. Maybe Billy is right, thought Chuck. The time for payment had come. They both jumped at the sound of the knock, which came from the front door. The men pointed their weapons toward the front of the front hall, then began walking toward it with careful steps. The knocks came again, with long pauses between them. It was a foreboding sound, carrying a deadly omen. Whatever was lurking outside the door, it was not in a hurry. Sweat flowed from both men's foreheads, their palms were also sweaty. They reached the door. Chuck aimed his gun at it, then signaled his partner to open it. Billy reached for the knob with hesitation and retracted it in a flash when the ominous knocks came again. Chuck did not hesitate. He began firing his pistol, and bullets began flying through the termite-ridden wood panels. Shrieks erupted from outside as the ballets hit flesh. Chuck stopped firing, then Billy kicked the door open. They rushed outside, but saw nothing. What the hell? Where is she? Asked Billy. I don't know, but let's find her before the cops come. The men began searching frantically. Chuck put a new magazine into his pistol. Billy hadn't fired a single shot yet, but he was eager to do so. The hairs on their backs stood up, then a second later Chuck screamed. Something jumped on him from the roof, and he was now pinned to the ground. Billy almost dropped his weapon, stepped back a few steps, then just stared as a human-like creature began tearing at Chuck's body. He was screaming from the pain as sharp claws sliced at his flesh. The air smelled of death and blood. Shoot her, for God's sake! Kill her! Chuck shouted in desperation, which woke Billy up from his confusion. He pulled the trigger, and the rounds started hitting the target. A few of them hit Chuck also, whose screams transformed into blood-filled gurgles and coughs. The creature shrieked, but it did not die. Billy saw it when the muzzle flashes illuminated the surroundings. The creature indeed was the girl they had assaulted earlier, but she was radically transformed. Her skin was pale, her body full of blood and wounds, her eyes dark pits. "Oh, God! Oh, God!" whined Billy. "I don't wanna die." He kept squeezing the trigger, but the magazine was already empty. The hollow clicks coming from the pistol added to the man's desperation. He did not see a thing clearly in the darkness, but heard that something was there, lurking in the dark, ready to pounce. And that was what happened. Anna jumped on Billy and knocked him to the ground. The man tried to fight her off, but she was too powerful. "Still want a piece of me?" Anna's voice was distorted, and it reeked of death and decay. She licked Billy's cheek with one slimy tongue. Normally, Billy would throw up, but his survival instincts did not let an inferior physiological response interfere with self-preservation. He frantically tried to get away, but Anna kept him pinned to the ground. Her claws dug deep into his biceps, drawing blood with no mercy. Billy screamed in pain. "I'll give you a piece of me," she said, while leaning close to his cheek and smelling him lustfully. "You will be my bitch now." This sentence came with a definite tone, then Billy heard the noise of something slimy moving about. Anna's eyes lit up with a feral red color. Her mouth had already transformed into a huge opening with lots of tentacles coming out of it. Foul-smelling saliva dripped onto Billy's chest. The gaping, hellish mouth gave birth to something long and wiggling. It dropped onto Billy, and he felt that it had sharp spikes on it, which pierced his flesh. It began to move, digging the spikes into the man's skin as it advanced ominously downward. "I can't wait to have a piece of that ass," the creature said in an anesthetic voice. The slimy spiked thing went under Billy's pants and pierced him from behind. He screamed in pain as the spikes cut him mercilessly. The creature held him down, so there was no escape. "Oh, yes," the creature said in response. "Your painy race makes suitable hosts for the legions of the Ancient One. I almost failed, but then you fools opened that door. How misguided were you?" Billy was beginning to feel dizzy as the alien organism began the transformation process. Then a heavy blow landed on the creature's head. Chuck was not dead yet, and with his last efforts, he reached for a piece of steel pipe nearby and struck. Then he struck again. The creature, which once had been Anna, fell onto the ground near Billy. Chuck kept hitting, and he knew he hit the creature because it grunted in pain, and tried to back off. He saw almost nothing. Only a faint dark shape. He was gravely wounded, and the blood loss did not help either. The creature shrieked when one of Chuck's blows missed. It grabbed his arm and dragged him down. Its eyes lit up, and the tentacles came out of its mouth, ready to envelop Chuck's head to deliver the symbiote. This was when Chuck plunged down the steel pipe straight into the creature's opening maw with his free hand. Rancid fluids sprayed into his face, but he did not stop. He plunged the pipe down many times until the creature's head became a pulp. The symbiote was dead too, smashed under Chuck's furious last blows. Chuck fell dead near the creature's body a second later. Billy's pain somewhat subsided as his consciousness was wavering. He was still feeling the sharp spikes dig around inside him, and also the warm blood running down his legs. Sirens were blaring in the distance, and Billy heard them. Gathering all his remaining strength, he began to limp away. He was not sure which fate was worse, being invaded by a monstrous entity, being arrested, or both of them. He decided that only one was quite enough, so he headed straight for the woods. When the emergency services arrived, they found 2 bodies, and signs that there had been a third person. They began their search, but it proved to be difficult as the sky was cloudy. About half an hour after they began their search for the third person involved, a heavy rain began pounding the area. The search had to be postponed. The next day, the search resumed, but it was already late. The severely mangled body of a hunter had been found. Whatever had gotten away, it had begun hunting and feeding. The alien creature watched from afar as the members of the puny race were searching for it. It needed time to get used to their bodies, to learn how it can take control more efficiently. But now, it knew. There was no stopping from now on. It was ready to bring glory to the gods, who lived in the endless darkness outside of this universe. A fresh world to feed on, a fresh hunting ground for the legions of the Ancient One. Only one task had remained, to complete the blood ritual, and summon the legions into this world.